When you think of art, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it paintings by Picasso? Statue of David by Michelangelo? Or, in a lesser aspect, do you think of different types of art forms, such as freeform drawing, or art by photos? Does your mind come across paper as art? Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Paper art? You're probably thinking maybe paper snowflakes you made in kindergarten, or origami, or even just art on a canvas. Well, all those are forms of art using paper or with paper. But there's more. Over time, the art forms of using paper to express yourself as a medium has improved. Now, to get into the history and types of art using paper, first we have to have some background knowledge on the invention of paper itself. Paper was invented around 105 AD by Sai Lun. This invention of paper was coveted by the Chinese nobility, and it earned him a place in the imperial palace, and then even as an imperial guard later on. After his time serving as an imperial guard, he was promoted to a marquis, where he sorted out China's taxes in certain areas. And also, he was taxed. The secret way of making paper could not stay in China forever, and eventually it made its way across Asia and into Europe. Our first type of art form is a form that can be used as art or even in the papermaking process to this day on finer sheets of paper, and that's watermarking. Watermarking was invented around the 13th century in Italy, and it's done by placing a thin wire on the sheet of paper during the forming process. So while the sheet's still being made, it's still wet. And this thin wire presses down the paper, creating indents in the paper. These indents, after the sheet is dried and formed, it is more sensitive to light, so the light passes through it better. Now these would create usually symbols to show either nobility, a company, trademark, basically what the sheet's made for and who it belongs to. The type of indents could also mean royalty, religious, or a group, secret organization. It could be anything. Moving on to our next form is embossing. Embossing is a technique where the paper is raised up instead of being pushed in, like in watermarking. This technique was first done in 1784 by a man named Valentine Huet in Paris. This technique he invented was made to raise the paper so that blind people could read by feeling the pages. Embossing, however, didn't really pick off until after around 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars, to help veterans with disabilities and vision problems, to help them read and be informed, to still contribute to society and try and lower the amount of poverty with all these disabled veterans coming in after the war. And in about 1827 in Britain, the literature trend of embossing came into play as well to try and lower poverty rates, educate the poor, and educate the disabled lower class. Heading to another part of the world, now we head over to Japan for their technique of suminagashi, also known as marbling. This is done by having a vat of oil or water, and then you put paint or ink on it, and that floats. And with the floating ink or paint, you take a sheet of paper and you drag it across. Now, with this technique, it was very abstract, and you could get a lot of different forms and symbols and like waves. After its release, of course, it spread. In Europe, around the 16th century, the technique flourished in Italy. In the 17th century, most of Europe was in on this art style. And in the 19th century, it made its way to America. Our next technique stays with us in Japan. It was brought by Buddhist monks around the 16th century. That technique is origami. Origami is the technique of folding paper into different objects, symbols, or animals. The term origami in Japan actually means folded paper. Originally, it was used for religious reasons, in ceremonies, weddings, but it was also later then used in terms of literature. In literature, the stories were usually symbolic, such as the one where the paper bird was turned into a real bird. Moving on to the other side of our neighbors to the east, in Europe, around the 16th century, Italian and French nuns invented a paper technique called quilling. Quilling is the technique of curling paper strips, thin paper strips, into various shapes, and then adding them together to make art forms. These various shapes can include a loose curl, a teardrop, a shaped teardrop, a square, a triangle, or even a crescent or a half circle, and many more. I hope you guys enjoyed that presentation video. If this piqued your interest or you would like to learn more about how to make paper, the art of paper, or the history of paper even, I highly encourage you to take Mr. Burry's Art and History of Paper Making lab, held at ESF, or if your school has a program like it, I highly encourage you to take that. It's a very fun elective and it's very informative and a good way to spend your time. If your school doesn't have a program like that, I highly suggest then looking stuff up on Wikipedia or elsewhere on YouTube is where else I found the information I used in this video, besides this lab manual and the knowledge I gained in that course. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and hope to see you again soon.